Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever the hope in my heart. And it's all because of you, Jesus. It's all because of you, Jesus. It's all because of your love that my soul will live. Oh, to be like you, I give all I have just to know you. Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever the hope in my heart. Oh, to be like you, I give all I have just to know you. Jesus, there's no one beside you. Forever the hope in my heart.
So I do have one thing to ask before Adam comes up. Pay attention tonight, don't fall asleep. No cuddling people. None of that fun stuff. Be attentive to all the speakers this summer, especially Adam. Adam's a great guy. And also you will be breaking out into small groups after this, so pay attention so you know how to answer the questions. And I'll give that to Adam Farnsworth.
Alright. So, good to actually have some summer. Right? We've had this rain and cold, and I'm sure you guys probably have seen this a million times, but you guys ever seen that meme where, I'm trying to remember it, I saw it, I cracked a laugh because it's so true. But it has like, up north, here's the weather, and it's like seasonal, winter, spring, summer, fall. And they have like these little figurines that kind of mimic what those are. Down south it's like this, and most of the time it's kind of warmer, things like that. And then it's West Virginia, it's instead of it being parts of the year, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You go from cold to hot to freezing to, anyway, that it's so true to the weather because we never know what we're getting each day. So it's nice that it's a nice day. You guys get to go outside in the sun and play games. Now, of course, then we just get into where we get sunburned and it's blistering hot. We don't want to go outside. But anyways, we're here. Thank you guys for having me. So I signed up. I guess that's what I did. I volunteered, I guess, to do two Wednesdays. So that means you get to hear from me tonight, and hopefully you come back next week knowing that I'm here, and you're not going to just skip out because, it's him again. I'm not going to come. But I promise it's going to be good, because instead of giving you kind of like just a one message type thing, I'm going to blend this into two messages for you. And I'll give you some tonight and then some next week. So give you something to look forward to, something to leave you hanging on. But I want to go in tonight looking at old school guy named Daniel. And there's an element in Daniel chapter 1 where basically is what's happening in the whole context kind of sets this up, is that the Israelite people, God's people, they've forgotten God. A big mystery there that happens all throughout the people's history. One moment they're on fire for God, they're following Him, they're obeying Him. Generations pass, and then they've completely forgotten God. So the Israelites have forgotten God, they ignored His commands, and as a result, they were invaded. They were captured. They were taken captive by Babylon, by this nation of people that are enemies of Israelites. And not only were they taken captive, but now they were taken like 600 miles away from their home. So they're not even in their land anymore. And so this kind of sets us up to where we're at when we go into Daniel chapter 1. I'm going to open a prayer real quick. God, thank you so much for tonight, Lord. Thank you for everybody that's here. And God, I pray that you just be with everybody here tonight, that you open up their hearts and their minds to hear your message, to hear your word, and that hopefully that when they leave here, God, maybe it's not going to affect them right away. But Lord, I pray that a seed will be planted, and that something that they have heard, they have felt here tonight, God, will help impact their life, and they can apply it to their life, Lord. And I pray as we look at an old story way back in the Old Testament, Daniel, Lord, I pray, God, that we find something so useful in this that will help us grow and better our relationship with you. Because that's our ultimate goal, Lord, to continue to grow and deepen our relationship with you. We just thank you once again for who you are. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So, in Daniel, this is where we're at, and people are taken captive. And we read here starting with verse 1, it says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim and just besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia, and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered, and I'm gonna butcher these names, I apologize. Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. So now you kind of maybe recognize his names. So they're taken captive, and basically and this kind of makes sense, it's kind of logical. This new culture, this new king, this new rule, they want the people they have captured to assimilate. They want these people to be like them. They want to make sure that they get rid of their old culture, their old beliefs, their old lives, and take on their own new ones. Ideally, so that their nation can grow, their people can grow, it can kind of stamp out maybe possibly some rebellion, some different things like that. And so what he does is this king wants these people who are near perfect, no physical defect, very, very smart, intelligent, capable, because they're going to go through the rigors of learning how to be a Babylonian. That's the goal. And so they want the best of the best to help do this. And they're going to serve in the king's court. So they got to be of a certain standard. And so imagine being Daniel, who's caught in the middle of all this, right? He's caught in the middle. He's not only just a prisoner, but he's also selected to be a servant in the king's court, to be close to the king, to be in it. As these conquerors usually do, they wanted these captives to shed their old life, shed their old culture, and become these full-blown Babylonians. So, he had, like I said, the best and the brightest selected to start teaching them the Babylonian culture. Gave them new names, and these names, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Belteshazzar, are names of Babylonian gods. So their new names are now named after these false pagan gods. He gave them kind of a new diet. He said you're to eat the food that's of the court, and just like we see in movies and TV show, it's rich food. It's like high salt. I mean, just terrible for you because it's just this glorified, the best of the best type of stuff. Now, I'm sure it probably tastes good, but for Daniel and the others, it's not in their diet. It's not what they normally eat. They're given a new diet, and the food that they are given is kind of forbidden by God. And he taught them to ditch the heavenly king for Babylonian gods and ideas. So this is Daniel. Put yourself in your spot where now he's not only just a prisoner, but now he's being kind of pressured and forced to learn a whole new ballgame. He's given names that are blasphemy to his God, made to eat food that is forbidden by God, all this stuff. And so imagine that. It's kind of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. So can you imagine being in his position, being forced to have this new name that completely just goes against God? You'd be called out by this name, and every time you hear it, it's a blasphemy against God because it's being named after a false God. So, have any of you ever been pressured? Anybody ever been pressured into doing something or pressured by people? Everyone should raise your hand because I'm pressuring you to raise your hand. Haha, gotcha. So we know what it's like to be pressured into something, and that's where it is. You feel almost forced, you feel almost like obligated, and the consequences of not doing so, you kind of weigh those out, but you feel that kind of pressure. See, Daniel was in this rough position, but instead, here's the kicker in this. Instead of becoming someone he's not, instead of becoming Belteshazzar and eating of this food that's forbidden to God and shedding God, the heavenly God, and taking on these pagan gods, instead of becoming someone he wasn't, he committed to God. He stayed committed and loyal to God. And here's the first point I want to bring up, is that there's freedom in obedience. Kind of makes it seem like, how does that go together? The question, what does that look like? You see, there's freedom in obeying God. You might think they don't go together because how can I be free? How can I have freedom if I'm stuck to obeying or having something held over me and be rigid? But see, with God, there's freedom. Because what happens is that even though Daniel is physically not free, he's spiritually free because he's choosing to be committed to God. And so God is giving him spiritual freedom in that. And you'll see later on here how God continues to help and guide and instruct him to overcome the obstacles that he's faced with. And this is all the same thing that he does with us. We may feel like we're held captive or prisoners, but we're actually free if we continue serving God. If we are committed to him, if we are obeying his commands, and they're not commands that are hard to obey. They may seem like a long list of them if you go through the Bible, but see, with him guiding you, it makes it so much easier. And by obeying that and doing so, man, there's freedom in that. And you'll see more of that here as we continue the story here with Daniel, is that he has freedom, even though he's held captive, because it's not physical type of freedom, which that can happen too, because with God anything's possible. So as we continue on reading here in verse 8, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. So the chief official is kind of like this high authority guy that's kind of over them and help with the learning and the teaching and the simulation type of thing. Now God has caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Wow, right there we see where God is like working already, right? Helping the official kind of have a softened heart to show favor with him. But the official told Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. That makes sense. You know, the chief official here, he's a little concerned because he's like, okay, if I don't give you this food and you starve, or you don't look as healthy as these others that are under the same, you know, care and supposed to be on the same, you know, type of schedule and eat the same diet, then the king's going to take notice, and who's he going to blame? He's going to blame me and off of my head. So it's legitimate. It's a concern. So here, Daniel said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this, and he tested them for 10 days. So Daniel gave him, here, got a deal for you. He said, just test us for 10 days. Give us only vegetables and water, which is closely more to what God would have in our diet. And scientifically, he'd say this, but it is healthier for us. Vegetables healthy for us. Water's healthy for us. I like my hamburger. I like my hot dog. I like my pizza. I like my Chinese food just like everybody else does. But honestly, that kind of food's a lot better for us, healthier. So anyway, so he says, give us this, test us for 10 days, and then see how we are. See what we look like. You know, then kind of judge your servants accordingly. You know, kind of sort us out accordingly. If we don't look healthy, if we don't look good, then all right, you can give us the terrible food or whatever. And so that's kind of what's happening here. So with this, Daniel is in this position. He's forced this new name upon him, which he's not going to really kind of accept. He's got this new name. Now he's given this diet that he knows it goes against God. But he stands resolved. Now, there's resolve and there's godly resolve. You see, normal resolve is kind of like your typical New Year's resolution, right? Okay, I'm going to do this, you know, and you make this resolve that you're going to do it this year, which come Valentine's Day, you've already done forgotten it. You've done lost it. So you're almost a month in or over a month and you've lost it. So there's that resolve, and then there's godly resolve. Now this godly resolve is a lasting commitment to God. And the reason why it's different is because it's powered by God. You know, the strength and power from it comes from God. It focuses on what's most important. It has the power to kind of, you know, surpass all these tough times, to help get you past that, to endure these tough times, because you're getting strength from God. You're getting God's strength. That is the difficult thing with our own resolve, like a New Year's resolution type thing. We're kind of generating that motivation from within ourselves. We're being motivated within ourselves. How strong am I? How strong is my willpower in this? Some of it, we're all different. Some of us have stronger willpower than others. But ultimately, we're kind of relying on ourselves at that case. And we're going to fail. But with this godly resolve that Daniel chose to have, he's getting power and a motivation from God. And that's so much more stronger, so much better to overcome tough times and hard times than if we relied on our own resolve. And so that is so crucial in this moment. In this tough time that Daniel is going through and having, he needs to have this godly resolve, because he's resisting the changes that are being pressured and pushed on him. And so luckily God has put wisdom in him to say, okay, hey, and of course this official was kind of softened. God has allowed him to show favor. He says, test us, right? So then we continue on here, verse 15. It says, at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. Awesome, right? So the guard took away their choice of food and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, which we said earlier was about like a 3-year type of schooling, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. So, here's God working. Here's God, working in Daniel and all the others' lives, giving them freedom in this, supposedly prison or held captive or trial tough time. And so we see here that Daniel and the others weren't really necessarily prepared for all this, right? I mean, who's prepared to have, an opposing enemy come and dominate you and then steal you away and force you to go to this 3-year school to strip away your culture and change your food and all that? They're not prepared for that. There's no way you can be prepared for that. And this is where it's an opportune time. This is where it's a good example of God equipping the called. God used Daniel and the others. He called them to do something specific for his plan, something powerful. And if you know Daniel and you hear these other names, you know they go on to do some phenomenal things. And so they're called to do this. They weren't ready for it. They weren't equipped. They didn't have the resources or the capabilities of doing that. But see, through this time, God gave them freedom. And because of their resolve, Daniel's commitment and the others' commitment to stick with God and to follow through, to not be swayed, he's equipping them. He's giving them exactly what they need to overcome this tough time. And that's why, so you might hear this all the time, but God equips the called. He doesn't call those that are equipped all the time. It's not always that, this person is perfectly, I'm not going to call you to my service until you're properly equipped. I'll wait. Right? To where we're like waiting until, I'm not good at anything, so God's never going to call me. That's not true. I mean, modern day times, the disciples weren't necessarily equipped at first to go out and do what Jesus is asking of them. But see, along the way, Jesus and God equips them, prepares them, gives them the resources they need to perform what God wants them to do. And that, I think, is crucial. Because, we often feel we have to be equipped before answering a call. But see, God's always there along the way to help you with what you need. Daniel and the others learned all they could about their new culture. That's what he said, right? They performed all the questions that the king asked them and everything they put forth. Man, they knew this new culture. They learned all they could about it to help do their work for God excellent. Now, while they learned, they maintained their obedience to God. And this is where, only God could really do this, because I don't know that I could. It would be really hard to where I'm in this position, I'm being pressured, I'm being forced to kind of go with this new culture. Then how do I maintain my faith in God? How do I stay committed? How do I have that godly resolve to what I know to be true? How do I do that? Well, I cannot do it myself. You cannot do it on your own. That's why God is so crucial. That's why there's that freedom in that obedience. That's why you got to have that godly resolve, not your own resolve. And you got to understand that God is going to equip you, especially if He's called you to a mission, called you to do something. You're going to hit a tough time. You're going to hit a speed bump. You're going to go through something in this culture which we face every year, something new, something more culturally that's affecting us and influencing and impacting us. It's pressuring us. And if we stick to these things, God's going to give us what we need to help overcome those things, to help us get through those things. And so that is what's so crucial, because culture doesn't have to be God's enemy. It doesn't have to be God's enemy. You know, if it doesn't violate his commands, I mean, that's where we have to have and pray for a level of discernment. We got to make sure that culturally it does not violate God's command. And we see through Daniel here where they might have been forced to eat this food that's forbidden by God. We think that's going to violate God's commands. But see, God helped work through that situation, and Daniel was able to maintain his commitment to God and not give in to that. So culturally, Daniel learned, and the rest, they learned all about this Babylonian culture. They soaked it all in because it's helping them continue God's work by being a light. As I mentioned earlier, if you know anything about Daniel's story, and these others in the stories later on, you see they go on, they influence a big change to a lot of high-powered people. They do some amazing things, and it's all because they learn this new culture that they're in, and they use it to benefit God. To put them in places where they needed to be, to put them in situations where God's light can shine and make a positive impact into this world. So the culture doesn't always necessarily have to be God's enemy. And that's hard for me to even look at, because I look at our culture today and there's a lot of negative stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's pressuring on all of us that we have to be or think or do certain things in ways, or we're tossed aside. And it's tough. But instead, we don't want to give in to that. If it doesn't violate God's commands, and this is where we have to step up and be bold. If we who follow God are free to be these competent leaders, right? We want to be these leaders that are capable to go out. We're being called to go out and be lights to everyone we come in contact with. If we're called to be this level of leader in our culture, then we have to be obedient to God and to his purpose. We have to be obedient to him. And so, to kind of set us up, I want to set you guys up for next week. Because I think looking at this and looking at Daniel and seeing these things that come out, I mean, this is just a few little things that you can pull out of just chapter 1. But we see so much there to where it helps us, it helps you be this powerful light that God needs you to be, that he's called you to be. And you're going to feel like, I'm not capable of doing that. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable. Guys, I'll tell you, to be honest, I never expected to be a youth pastor. I told myself there's no way I could be a youth pastor. When I was your age, I had a good friend of mine who became my youth pastor, and I watched him. I listened to his sermons. I'm like, there's no way. I don't know the Bible enough. I can't memorize scripture. There's no way I could teach and be that type of leader. Joke's on me. God had other plans. And it's literally before I knew it, it was this moment, like years after I had that thought, I saw that years go on. I'm in my little church that I grew up in, and I remember one day I'm here, and like I slowly was helping out in youth and slowly started to teach and taking over one thing and stuff. Next thing you know, it hit me like, I'm doing it, aren't I? I mean, I laugh about it now, and I still get cold chills because I never thought I was able and had the resources and capability to answer that call of being a youth pastor. So that's a prime example, personally for me, where God equips you as you go. Because if you are obedient to his call, you're obedient to this purpose that he has in your life, he's going to give you all you need. He's going to give you the resources that you need. I'm still not the greatest memorization guy in the world. But man, when it comes down to it, God is who I rely on, and he gives me what I need. Because I had to realize it's not me that has these capabilities or these resources. It's God. And Daniel recognized that. The other three recognized that, and they stuck to it, and they went on to do some phenomenal things, to be these leaders in this culture that is pressuring against them. Right? I mean, if you recognize Daniel was also thrown into the lion's den because the king decreed to stop praying. He wasn't allowed to pray, but Daniel didn't listen to that. He continued to pray to God. He got caught for it and was thrown in the lion's den. Now, God was with him. The lions didn't eat him, and it impacted all those that saw and witnessed that. That's a powerful moment. In this culture that was pressuring to go against God. So if we can be the leaders we are meant to be in this culture, then that also means that we are ready to go and have a deeper relationship with Christ. We got to go deeper. We got to go beyond the surface. We got to go beyond just showing up here for the games and the cafe, and we got to go deeper. Because the deeper you go in your relationship with God, the higher you can rise. There's a speaker who shared a story that his dad they lived in a city, they would drive by and go to where they're building skyscrapers and go up the fence as far as they could, and they'd see this giant, they're just digging so far down in the earth. And he asked his dad when he was a kid, he's like, what are they doing? Why are they digging? They need to go up for a skyscraper, right? And the father told him, he said, well, the deeper that you go down and build a stronger foundation, the higher the skyscraper can go. Because you're digging deeper. Same way with our faith. We got to be able to dig deep. And in order to go deep, in order to get to that level, to continue to go down that road, we do that by being honest with our disappointments with God. And I want to leave you hanging right there, because that's going to lead us into what I want to talk about next week. I'm going to leave it because it's going to question you. How I can be disappointed with God? I don't know. Maybe not. How does that deepen my faith? Well, come back next week, and I'll show you. So I hope this helps you guys out. I hope this helps you understand that there's freedom in obeying God. There's freedom in it. You may feel like you're confined, but there's freedom. And you got to have that godly resolve to persevere, to be committed, to stay committed to God. And don't worry about feeling the lack of adequacy, that you're not capable of it, because God will equip you to fulfill His purpose in your life. Lord God, I thank you so much for tonight, Lord. I thank you for who you are. I thank you for just blessing us, and I thank you for allowing us to be here to hear your message, Lord. I thank you for what you did for Daniel and the rest of those guys, Lord. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Lord. And I know that's their pagan names, Lord, but I thank you for not letting that sway them, for not letting them give up and give in and not be able to fulfill what you had for their lives, Lord. And I thank you for allowing us to be able to look back at them and what they achieved and apply it to our lives, and we can learn from that, Father. And so I pray as you continue to be with each of us and we go out and we fulfill your purpose in our life, Lord, that we know that you have our back, that you're there with us, guiding us and protecting us, Lord, giving us the strength that we need to persevere. Thank you so much once again for who you are, what you do. We just give you all the praise and glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Hey, let's go ahead and give it up for Adam. That's such an amazing job when it comes to speak. So now we're going to break up into our small groups. So girls, you're staying in this area. Guys, you're going back in the hall. And after we're done with small groups, you are free to go, or